Finish up whatever you got. Did anybody feel the impulse to not share? Did you find yourself doing the shield maneuver? That one? We'll talk about that as an aspect of schooling another time. Okay. This is going to be awkward. I'm going to try to sync the video audio stuff. Ready? Is this right how we do it, Ken? Good. I woke up those of you who were listening too. That was doubly effective. I didn't intend for it to do that. Okay, so there's the definition. Education is the deliberate, systematic, sustained effort to transmit, evoke, or acquire knowledge, attitudes, values, skills, or sensibilities, and any learning that results from the effort. And any learning that results from the effort. And any learning. The effort and the learning that results from the effort, direct or indirect, intended or unintended. Right? We're going to continue to talk about learning. We started it last time. We're going to talk about it a little more today. I'm going to try to finish up getting some basic facts about learning on Thursday. Here's how the slide for me represents the major point of last Thursday's lecture. Learning's wild, right? What's that mean? That's not a rhetorical question. Somebody help out, yeah? It's happening all the time, right? You can't turn it off. There's no off switch for learning. Well, there's death, which is a kind of off switch, right? But even when we're asleep, some people would argue that death is not an off switch either. I'll let those kinds of religious conversations go into another course. Even when we sleep, our brain is making sense of stuff, right? Maybe learning is another word for making sense of stuff. So we're always learning all the time. Right? Even if it feels like we're just going through the motions we already know. Even if we're going through motions we already know that don't activate our attention in any way. Walking into an elevator, something we've done 100 times. Sitting in a chair, walking across a stage, walking from the room to here, right? Having a conversation, saying good morning, picking up the telephone, knowing what to say. Picking up the telephone, knowing what to say, knowing how to interpret whatever's said to you. When you pick up the phone, you know if it's a telemarketer pretty quick. How do you know that? It doesn't activate your attention. You just kind of know. You just kind of go through the motions. Even when you do that, that groove that you're in is getting deeper, and that's a kind of learning. The deepening of a groove, the reinforcement of what you already know, even that. The obvious stuff is when you pick up something you've never picked up before. When your attention is activated. You're noticing things you didn't notice before. Your body is doing things it didn't do before. Your mind is asking questions or seeing things it didn't ask or see before. That's the easy stuff. But even when we're just going through the motions, we're still learning all the time. There's a second part to the learning is wild. We're always learning all the time. And? Yep. Always learning more than one thing at a time. And if we go back to Kremen's definition of education, again, it gives us help. And Kremen says what? Knowledge, attitudes, values, skills, or sensibilities. You see how knowledge and skill is usually how we do it, right? What do you know and what can you do? But here there's more. Attitudes, values, sensibilities, attitudes. Your stance toward things. Values, what's important to you, what you believe. Sensibilities, what you notice, what you feel, what you sense. Okay? So we're always learning all the time and always learning more than one thing at a time. If we try to do learning on purpose, if what we're trying to do is educate, the implications begin to get clear. Right? Is that we can't just teach math. We can't. You can't turn off all the other stuff because there's all other kinds of learning happening too. We walk into class and you're deciding whether or not you're going to trust me over the next 9 weeks. I can't make you do it. I can't teach you to trust me, but you're picking that stuff up. You're learning that as you go. You're learning who's to sit next to and not next to you. If you want to avoid getting called on or avoid the eye contact of the instructor, you're learning where to sit. We're always learning, and we're always learning more than one thing at a time. Now, I'm going to put that on Thursday. I'm going to start a thing that's going to go across the whole quarter. I'm going to have little whiteboards. I'm going to call them claim boards. They're a place for us to keep track of some basic facts. It's my contention that just that fact, the learning is wild fact, always learning more than one thing at a time, right? Just that fact is a transformative fact if we take it seriously. I don't even take it seriously, because I don't think it's a matter of taking it seriously or treating it as a joke. If we remember this is true. Okay? All right. And then I told you the story of my daughter seeing this thing. Looks like a spider. No, it looks like a duck. Must be a spider duck. And my other daughter calling her ankle a leg wrist. And to me, those are just anchor points for that idea about learning all the time. Right? It's not, you don't have to remember that story. I don't care what story you remember. I'm sharing with you an anchor point, and I bet you have a story too. A story of learning active, right? Learning that maybe it's something you witnessed. Often enough, when we do it ourselves, we don't notice it. We just do it, right? But if you've been around children for more than about 5 minutes, you see children actively making sense of the world. Right? So choose an anchor story. And that's really all the story's for. It's an anchor story. If it made you laugh, that's great. Whenever I think of that story, I feel delighted. You choose your own. All right. Today, I told you, I promised you on Thursday. I didn't promise. I said I was going to do it today. And so today we're going to do it. If this is true about learning, well, how does learning work? And I'm going to change that question. Let me back up for just a second, because there's another point I wanted to make. There's a slide I wanted to put in, and I couldn't find a good image that wasn't stealing. And it's an image of a suitcase. Another way to think about learning is to think about not what we have in our head, but what we carry from one scene to the next. And I said that on Thursday in passing. Unfortunately, I suspect it'll continue to be in passing because it's not part of my regular thing yet. Learning's wild, but also a way to think about learning is what we bring from one scene to the next, right? And every time, this walking across the stage movement, for me is like, okay, I'm here, and I do some stuff in my life, right? And then I go here, and then I do some stuff, and I carry forth knowledge, attitudes, values, skills, or sensibilities, mind, body, heart, spirit, right? Think, do, say, make, believe, see, however you divide up all the things we're learning, I carry something forward with me. And it's not, sometimes skills matter, right? There's a few basketball players, I'm a little self-conscious once I learned that there's a few people on the UCSB basketball team who were in class, and I realized I was comparing the class to a basketball game, and I thought, well, I'm a little out of my depth now. But in any case, right, but you're playing a sport, and you go from one to another, you have a skill, you know how to take a shot, right? You got to walk in an elevator. You got to pick up the phone and say good morning. So there's some of it is skills, but there's a whole lot else that we carry that is not, we don't just do it, it's like ready to be called upon. Right? Because the world's pretty unpredictable. So that's the way to think about learning. It's not just what we can do, but what we carry forward that can be activated at a moment's notice. That can be called forth. So that when somebody says to you, good morning, you have an idea about what comes next. And if they don't say good morning, so what? Or maybe if you expect to hear good morning, what's activated is a kind of indignation. Why did you say good morning to me? Good morning. And that might be how you respond to that situation. Good morning. Or good morning. Or whatever else it is. That's brought forward with you. Okay, so I wish I had a slide for that. What I promised, backing up a little bit, what I promised on Thursday that I wanted to try to deliver today is a way of thinking about how learning proceeds, right? And this walking across the stage kind of gesture is a way to think about sort of representing spatially what happens over time, which is that we go from one scene to the next. We wake up, we see our roommates, maybe we get dressed first, that'd probably be nice, and then we do whatever thing. We move from one scene to the next. But at every one of those stages, and here's a kind of bottom line basis, right? At every one of those stages, we could go left, right, straight. We could do all kinds of things in any situation, right? We're not following a script. It might feel like we are sometimes. But we could do other things. So how is it that learning, what is the path that learning takes? So here's one representation of it. Let's see what this does. path did learning take? It didn't look much like a straight line, did it? Why show a video of a French song, a kid rolling around on the floor? Because I guess I want to start out with, all right, so how does learning, learning is wild, but what does learning look like in the wild? Right? That is, outside of a classroom, outside of first do this, then do that, then do the other thing. Open your books to page 42. Those of you who just right now went, wait, book, page 42? This is part of the lecture. Roll with it. Open the books to page 42. Please find the paragraph. We'll read in order, and then you'll have a quiz. When you take out those kinds of really constrained environments, and there are just as many constrained environments on the sports field in practice, right? In church, in whatever, there's a whole, in your fraternities or sororities, there are moments where we confine learning. But what does learning look like in the wild? If learning is wild, well, let's take learning into the wild, and what's it look like? And I think this is a really nice anchor point, right? Left alone, this baby doesn't sit like this, waiting for instructions. That'd be weird if a baby looked at their wrist. Although, actually, that's kind of an interesting point, right? How many of you have, when you didn't have a watch on, look at your wrist anyway? Yeah, some of you have done that, right? Like, hey, what time is it? I don't know. It's like this, you learn that gesture anyway. So I guess I can see a child doing that. But you leave a baby or a child, actually any one of us by ourselves, it doesn't take much time for us to start rolling around figuratively on the floor. That would also be weird if when we left you alone you started rolling around on the floor like this. The grown-up, if you notice, came in at one point in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I have a feeling that the grown-up took away a sharp object, but I'm not sure. I've never been able to freeze it on that frame. What's the point? Learning in the wild just happens. Right? 2 points to make about this. In the first place, it doesn't happen in a straight line. It goes from one thing, question, decision to the next. I started this morning, I woke up kind of early, and I don't have a fetish for Sons of Anarchy, but I am right in the middle of, at the end of season 5. Don't look at me and go, ooh, here it comes. I know, I've heard it already before. But I thought I recognized this one character on Sons of Anarchy, a character named Opie. And I looked up Opie, Sons of Anarchy online, and 45 minutes later, I had learned so much, not only about Opie, but the fact that Ryan Hurst, the actor, was originally in a movie called Remember the Titans in 2000 with Denzel Washington. And I learned that his father, who's played on Sons of Anarchy, this guy, right, William Luckman, I think it's Luckman, that he was a character actor and that he started the Santa Paula Theater Center, which is 4 miles from my house, where they offer acting classes. And son of a bitch, I should take some acting classes. Left alone, with access to the internet. My learning looks kind of like this. Bounces around, right? It doesn't bounce around randomly. It goes from one thing to the next. In a kind of path. You hit a dead end, and you back up, you go to the next one. 2 points to make about this. One of them is motivation doesn't seem to be a problem. I guess when and we'll come back to this. We'll circle back to this over the course. We talk about motivation being a problem, but that seems to be much more about getting kids to do the things that we want them to do. Because once learning's put into the wild, once we put a kid in the wild, it doesn't seem like motivation is much of a problem. This kid doesn't wait for instructions. I don't think we do either. On Thursday, I said that we're voracious, omnivorous, right? Voracious, we can't get like, I don't think that's just my mind or this kid's mind or my kid's mind or the people that I love. I think it's all of us. But if I were to use a non-scientific way of describing how we learn, in the first place, it's voracious. And it's already motivated. It's already moving. That's point number one. Motivation doesn't seem to be a problem when we put learning in the wild. Motivation, incidentally, etymologically, like the word, how's that word put together? There's other words with motive in it, right? Automotive, self-moving. Motivate is just another word for movement. Movement doesn't seem to be a problem when learning's put into the wild. Those of you who are note takers today, write that shit down. Motivation doesn't seem to be a problem. If you don't know if you're a note taker, you can nominate yourself, that's fine. But another point is that so point number one, motivation is not a problem. Point number two, learning in the wild, I'm going to say it a lot of different ways, so be ready, doesn't follow a straight line. Right? It moves, but it doesn't follow a straight line. Not very often. You can take a small segment of time and probably find it following a straight line, right? And when we're in the middle, it might feel like we're following a straight line because we're going from one thing to the next, right? We're moving in a line, but that line is wiggly. Better said than wiggly. That line is branchy. We could investigate one thing or another. That child could roll to the left or the right or the middle or grab any one of 5 toys. When we're in the middle of it, it seems like we're moving in a straight line. But if we take a step back, a step above, it doesn't move in straight lines. So that's point number 2. It doesn't move in straight lines. In fact, learning in the wild doesn't like straight lines. How about that? Not just that it doesn't move, it just doesn't like straight lines. It wants to go from one thing to the next, for sure, but that one thing to the next is following branches until they peter out and then backing up and going somewhere else. There's a danger here in the way I've set it up in talking about learning in the wild versus learning, I don't know, in a cage or something. I don't actually want to take that part too seriously. It's really just a kind of tool for thinking with. Because in fact, even when we confine learning to a seat, and you know, my agenda, one slide to the next, which is my straight line, right? Even then, your brain is taken off in all kinds of detours. Your brain doesn't want to be confined. It just doesn't. Your body doesn't want to be confined. How many of you already want to get up and move around? Raise your hand high. Let's just do that for a minute. Just move around a little bit. Just do it. Stand up. Move around. Good. Nice. Moving your mouth, moving your body, moving those hips around. Some people are like, I'm going to the bathroom. I was hoping. Good. Whoa. Man, a little judo up on the stage. Good. All right, take a seat. Even you. Man. I'm totally cool. I'm good. How many of you saw, what's your name? Samuel? Saw Samuel? I have a nephew named Samuel, so don't be offended if I say Samuel, because that's what we say to him. So Samuel gets up on stage. How many of you are like, man, that guy's crazy? Raise your hand. Yeah, but that's what Samuel's body and mind and heart wanted to do. Just because, this is maybe another point. Maybe this is a third point that I didn't even see coming, but let's make it now because we're ready. Some of you, and by the way, let me make the point and then follow it up. The way your learning goes is not the way everybody else's learning goes, right? Well, that was clumsy the way it came out, right? The path your learning wants to take is not the path that everybody else's learning wants to take. Those of you who felt yourself rolling your eyes when I said everybody move around, maybe it felt like 3rd grade. Some of you were like, God, thank God he's letting us move around. And maybe Samuel too. I get to get on the stage. Do some kind of, man, I've always wanted to do that. Do you know how many times I've tried to do that, like jump up and land on my feet and knock the wind out of myself? So some of you look at Samuel and like, that guy's crazy. But Samuel wasn't thinking that. He's like, man, I get to move around and do kicks. Some of you just sat and moved your mouth. Some of you went to the John. Some of you moved your hips around, right? Your bodies want to do what they want to do. I don't mean for us to move from that point to say, and so it's all good, let's be free. I'm saying, how does learning work? We didn't evolve to sit in classrooms, so what happens already? Before we start trying to make you sit in a seat or put a cage around you, or walls around you, or a curriculum in front of you, what does it want to do? So learning's wild. We're always learning more than one thing at a time. We're always learning. Right? Learning in the wild, motivation is not a problem. It's already motivated. That's the way to talk about what's happening. It's moving around. And the path that it takes is kind of branchy. And the third point, which I like, I don't have a slide for it, so I'll forget it. Your job is to remember, which is that yours is not like mine. So we take that into school, and what happens? Right? Again, it's an anchor story for me. It doesn't need to be your story. Some of you have heard this story before. My teacher said, I don't remember what grade it was. In other talks, I've probably given it a grade. I don't remember what grade it was. My teacher said, if you're drawing a triangle, you can't have more than one obtuse angle. You can't make a triangle if you have more than one obtuse angle. An obtuse angle being an angle that's greater than 90 degrees. I said to myself, prove the teacher wrong. A whole lot of my life was spent doing that. It didn't always work in my favor. So I went home and I got a tennis ball. And I just started drawing a triangle on a tennis ball, drawing 3 straight lines on a tennis ball. And it turns out that if you curve the space, if you curve the surface, you can make a triangle with 2 obtuse angles. Try it. And it turns out that the theory of curved space, those of you who are astrophysics majors, even just physics majors, this is an obvious point about curvature of space. Right? Parallel lines will meet, that kind of stuff. And space is curved, I think. But I was just a kid. I was trying to prove the teacher wrong. I didn't have, my motivation wasn't to be like, wow, like, ooh, triangles. I love triangles. And I love balls. I should see if I could, it was my motivation, right? My incentive was this teacher was telling me that I can't, and I was saying, I can. And I did. And I walked into class. I was so proud. At first I think I remember, I may have told the story enough times that I've created that memory. My memory is I went to my parents and I said I did it, and they were like, all right. Dinner's ready. But I walk in the teacher and say, I did it. And this happened. Some version of this happened for sure. I did it. And the teacher went, oh, on flat surfaces. All right. As if somehow I'd missed, the teacher had just forgotten to give me a simple fact. How does this relate to what I've just said? Because I was in the middle of this pretty straight line, right? Don't go outside of it. You can't do this. And I went, really? Right? And I moved off to one side. And it wasn't done in any kind of anger. I just got gently nudged back on. And I put the tennis ball down. And I never did it again. There was no tragedy here. I'm not like, oh, my life could have been so different if the teacher had just said, oh, that's amazing. You did a tennis ball class. Jason did. He's a geometrical genius. My life would, I don't know what would have happened. That's not the point. The point is to make for me, it's an anchor story. Like, I want to go, you want to go out and try stuff, right? But school is an awfully good institution for saying, oh, no, not now. Or maybe not now. Maybe not ever is really, right? No, we don't do it that way. We don't, because the teacher could have said, what some of you have heard lots of times, it's just, oh, curved spaces. You'll get to that in college. Or, oh, yes, we're in 3rd grade. That's in 4th grade. You'll get to that in 4th grade. Let's stick right with 3rd grade now. Very nice. My kid wants to do cursive. And she's in 1st grade. She wants to do cursive. Anybody have any guesses what the teacher said? We'll do that in 3rd grade. Print. Like, why? We'll get to the why question later. But the point about learning is that even when we put it in, even when we think we know what path it's going to take, and we put it in there, we have a rule, as we just want to go out. We want to break through those fences and go somewhere else. Motivation wasn't a problem. My motivation might have been yours. Did anybody else try to do that with a triangle in their lifetime? Yeah. maybe 1, 2 other people. Okay. So if you've read David Hawkins, if you haven't read David Hawkins, we'll have a quiz on it on Thursday. I'll give you the questions. I'll send you the questions by email tomorrow. David Hawkins makes this point. He says, if you follow any one person's, if you could map any one person's learning trajectory inside of a subject matter, right? This gesture, I'm putting a boundary around it. Like, this isn't learning in the world in the wild. This is like learning in math or learning in whatever it is. Learning how to fix a motorcycle, or learning how to shoot a jump shot, or learning how to do that crazy salsa spin, or learning how to meditate, right? If you look at if you could map any one person's learning path, it would look like a tree. If you could map it. And I think that that's a nice way of wrapping up what I've said so far about learning, right? Because we talk about individual people. The stories are about me or about my kid, and maybe you've come up with some stories too, and you're thinking about some stories too. That you get if I were to map it, you kind of go along and you get a fork. You could go left, you could go right? You could stick with flat paper, you could get a tennis ball. And you go one way, and then you go until that you stop. And you back up. It's another way of saying you go until you mess up. You make a mistake. Right? If I've got a straight line version of learning, a mistake means I got to take a step back. If I've got a tree map, then a mistake just means I've got to take another fork, try something else. I have a doctoral student who did this dissertation. She analyzed 2 guys trying to fix a motorcycle. One of them knew a lot about electronics. The other person used to own the motorcycle and had sold it to the first person. So they each had different kinds of knowledge. And the thing wouldn't start. And she using the idea from Hawkins, she kind of mapped it out. And in fact, just to get the motorcycle fixed, it wasn't solve this problem, next problem. It was, I'm going to try this out. Does this wire mix around with this wire? That doesn't work. Try something else. Right? Back up and you go, wow. At any moment, what you have, you see these faces light up when she's looking at these 2 guys trying to fix a motorcycle because they try one thing, they try another, and it finally works, and their faces light up because they've got something, right? Using this metaphor of this tree-like map, this branched structure, they've figured out some area, and then they move on to the next problem. So David Hawkins is asking us in the very first place, if we take seriously the basic claims about learning that I laid out at the beginning, then what would it look like if we mapped it out individually? And his point is, he says, if you map it out, it looks like a tree. But if we take everybody's learning map and lay them on top of each other, it would look more like a leaf. Right? Rather than being branches that fork and diverge, right? Which is often what it feels like individually. I think that's accurate, not what it feels like. I think it's accurate. Talk about when we're learning some subject matter. But if you lay them on top of each other, you get something that looks more like a network, which is your path might be a branch, but then it's going to overlap with somebody else's. So a way to talk about the way a subject matter might be mapped would be more like a leaf than a tree. More like a leaf than a tree. So who cares, right? Because we're talking about learning. You're talking about your kid. What's your kid's name?
Aaliyah.
Aaliyah? How do you spell it?
A-L-I-A-H.
A-L-I-A-H. Nice. What's your child's name? Yes. Melanie. Aaliyah, Melanie. In the back with the beard. What's your child's name? Jaden. Aaliyah, Emily, Jaden. What's your child's name?
Sanaya.
What is it?
Sanaya.
Tanaya?
Yeah.
Why you look embarrassed when you say that?
No, you said it wrong. Sanaya.
Sanaya. So nice. I like that. Now I'm with you. See, now you care enough to be like, actually, that's nice of you, but that's wrong. Aaliyah, Emily, Jaden, Sanaya, with an S?
Yes.
Sanaya, whatever, whoever these kids are, right? Yes. I don't mean, that sounded so offensive, didn't it? Like, yeah, how nice, whatever. I don't mean it that way. What I mean is, whoever these kids are, their individual pathways, right, are going to look like trees. So why do we care that a subject matter might be mapped like a leaf, more like a network? The word would be reticulate. Reticulate. Like a network, like a net. Those of you who speak other Romance languages, red, right? It's a net. Reticulate, networked. But why would we talk about that? Because now we can talk about learning as possibility, right? Not the path that learning does take, but all the paths that learning might take. Which means that if you're Aaliyah or Melanie, I said Emily, didn't I? Why didn't you correct me? She corrected me. Does she love her child more? I changed it. Aaliyah, Melanie, Jaden, Sanaya, they might take any one of these paths if left to their own devices and even in the presence of some other who knows well. I've just covered a ton of terrain with respect to learning. What's that? I said I've just covered tons of terrain. I can't repeat it because I just invented it on the spot. Can somebody else repeat what I said before that? Some of you are like, wait, when, what, before? Let me try it again. I'm off. I can't do it.
They come together.
Oh yeah, the idea is that if any one of these, Aaliyah, Melanie, Jaden, Sanaya, right? Any one of their pathways might look like a tree, but when I think about this image rather than a tree, I go from what path does learning actually take to what paths might it take. So when I begin to transfer my claims about an individual person learning to what learning might look like in and through a subject matter, it opens up, it makes learning more into opportunity. And it's real hard once I have a leaf-like reticulate networked map of all the paths that learning might take. It would be very difficult for me to say, you're really off track. The only way you can say off track is if, I'll do this. The only way you can say off track is if you've got a path already grooved in. If you already know for sure the path that learning from your child, Aaliyah, Melanie, Jaden, Sanaya, should take. I want to be very cautious, though, because I don't want to say learning is either wild or it's confined. And many of you might have heard it's either good or it's bad. That would be the wrong way to think about it. But if we start thinking about subject matter in a slightly more rich way, we can at least begin to acknowledge that the pathways you took might not be the pathway that Aaliyah needs to take. Or Melanie, or Jaden, or Sanaya. It makes us just a little bit suspicious of any claims that say, now what you need to do is X. Now what you must learn is Y. We'll be much more contingent, much more hesitant, much more, let's wait and see. Let's try this and let's see how it works. Okay. Hawkins makes another point, and this feels like we're probably pretty saturated here. So we're coming to the end of the big content part. I'm going to have you do one more thing in class. Hawkins makes another point, which is that you can chop all the branches off, right? And you can turn a tree or a net or network, you can make it look more like a ladder than a tree. I can say in advance, I know which branches you shouldn't take. Don't make the mistakes that I made, which is a stupid-ass thing to say. Straight up. Because maybe exactly the right thing for Aaliyah or Melanie or Jaden or Sanaya is to make his or her own mistakes. We say two things. You learn from your mistakes, but don't make any mistakes. Have you ever heard that? Raise your hand if you heard that. You learn from your mistakes. Excellent. How many people have also heard some version of don't make the mistakes that I made? Yeah, don't those seem in contradiction at some level? I'm not saying, look, don't hear me as saying things are all black, white. Just let's get thinking about it. When we start turning what would happen in the wild, a more branched tree-like structure, Jaden trying to figure things out on his own, when we cut off all the branches and say, don't worry, I got this. I know what path you should take. I know that once you learn to count, you will learn to add. And once you learn to add, you will learn to... God, you guys, this was a spot for you to fill in. Once you learn to add, you will learn to... And right after subtraction, you will learn to... And right after multiplying, you will learn to... And right after dividing, what will you do next? Fractions. Some people go long division, like a little half step. Then fractions. And after fractions, people are looking around like, I don't remember that. That was elementary school. After fractions, a lot of times we go geometry. In the current Common Core curriculum, sometimes it's more algebra. But then you leap over, you do some like pre-algebra, some stuff in junior high school, which is mostly dealing with hormones, not math. And then you get to high school, and you get algebra. And what's after algebra? Again. And it goes on. That's the big macro version. We also do the micro version, which is we're going to finish page 1, and then tomorrow you'll do page 2. So then when my daughter comes home, even at first grade, and I say, Mama, what page are you on? And she shows me the page, and I say, oh, there's this really interesting thing 2 pages along. And she goes, we can't go 2 pages along. We're on page 2.4. I said, well, we got 2.4, but we can go to 2.5. Or even leap ahead and do some 2.6. We can't do that, Dad. Like I'm the dumb one. We can cut the branches off. And nobody freaks out. In fact, we've done it so often and so regularly that it feels natural. I made a little shift here, right? I've talked about a straight line and now I've moved it into a ladder, and there's a reason to do that. Because a ladder helps us think about more or less a little bit more easily. There's some very big implications from this. I'm going to introduce them, and then we're going to take a rest. If we're learning in a tree-like way, or a leaf-like way, and you go do your thing over there, and I take a branch over here, you try X, I try Y, you try to use the black wires, I'll try to use the red wires, you use a screwdriver, I'll try to use some pliers, you hammer a nail, I'll turn a screw, you write a prepositional phrase, I end with a period. If we're in a tree-like structure, we can look at each other from across that expanse, across that difference, and say, what are you up to over there? Here's what I'm up to over here. And maybe we should meet metaphorically and talk. Why did you add a prepositional phrase? I ended with a period. Your sentence is a whole paragraph long. My sentence is 5 words. And we're trying to say the same thing. You went for a layup. I pulled up for a jumper. What? You decided to draw on a tennis ball. I stuck with graph paper. If we think about a tree-like structure, we can say, what are you doing over there? That's interesting. Here I am over here. We should talk about how you wound up over there, the decisions you made, and the decisions I made over here. And in fact, it's a much more dynamic, but also rich, and frankly, better, I think, of covering a subject matter. You go your way, I go, we will figure out where we are. But the minute we cut off the branches, there's only one way that we can regard each other. Not, are you over there, and I'm over here, but it's more like this. What page are you on? 20? I'm on page 65. Once we make it a line, stretched out, then the way that we regard each other is higher or lower. Because how else are we going to regard each other? That's a pretty big implication. That means there's something available to be learned that's not the subject matter, it's how we regard each other. That's a pretty big implication, isn't it? It's enough of a big implication and common enough that when you walk into a classroom and I divide a class into red and blue groups, the first questions on kids' minds is, which is the smart group and which is the dumb group? Which is the fast group and which is the slow group? Does anybody remember the name of their reading group? I do, red-winged blackbirds, and I don't remember hardly anything because I got a brain injury in college. I lost a bunch of stuff, and I still remember kindergarten, red-winged blackbird. What? It's not because the label meant anything. It's not because I had a bird fetish. It's because red-winged blackbirds was the fast group, and that was important to me. I don't think that's just my pathology. I think that I know that when we walk into classrooms, we see kids oriented to this all the time. The only way we can orient to each other that way if there's an already existing structure that says, you're higher, I'm lower. You're faster, I'm slower. You're first, I'm next. This is why to think about this. This is an implication for how we think about how learning works. And if we make the mistake of thinking that learning, in fact, naturally in the wild happens like a ladder, then the way that we regard each other as smart, slow, fast, dumb will also seem likewise natural. This has very big implications for how we think about the world, especially where that world involves other people. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more on Thursday, but don't get ready to leave. It sounds like I'm ending. Don't. We'll talk some more on Thursday about the other reading that we had for today, which was On Lynn's Shapes, which is just another example of how when you give an individual person, not just a kid, but grown-ups too, just a little bit of room, interesting stuff happens. And not because On Lynn is a genius, but because that's just how it works. All right. I'm not gonna. But this is a cool slide. It's got animation. You guys mind? It'll only take like 30 seconds. I'm proud of it, so this allows me to. We imagine that learning happens like this, but in fact, it's more like that. Sorry. Oh, how nice. Did that make me the smart instructor? I'm in the Red Wing Blackbird group for instructors. I asked you all to have a name for your child. The names, we got 4 names. Aaliyah, Melanie, Jaden, Sanaya. How do I spell Sanaya? S-I-N-I-Y-A. S-I-N-A. Just be careful because, her nickname might be Sin. I know. I had a friend who, when we were trying to name our kids, he was one of these guys. His name is Peter. No wonder. Right? Every time I gave a name, he found all the weaknesses in it. Right? It'd be like, I'm naming my kid Richard. You can't name your kid Richard. They'll call him Dick. Right? So I'm kind of primed to it. I was going to name my second daughter Ruby. And he said, Ruby? Hi, Peter. Yeah, right. Each of you is getting a little, it's not a blank sheet, but it's got on one side, it's got a picture of a kid. It doesn't have a picture of a kid. It has an outline of a gingerbread cookie. You're going to hear us call this. You guys can be, just while I give you some instructions while you're getting these. At the very top, it has your child's name. By the way, you can change it later, but I gave you some homework over the weekend, right, which is to think of a name that you cared about. Right? I'm going to post a PDF of this online, so if you screw up what I'm going to ask you to do next, or you want to do it differently, don't panic. Just download another copy and print it out. There's a place for your child's name. There's a place for your name. Write your name first, because you know that one for sure. You're going to bring this to class every day for the next 9 weeks. Okay? Now, write down your child's name too. If you already have a child, pick the one you love the most. And don't lie. Don't act like you don't love one of them more. I'm kidding. Okay, so you've got your child's name. You got your name. Now, you're going to spend the next 10 minutes doing one of two things. Either on the back with just words, or on the front with words and pictures, you are going to begin illustrating and annotating this child of yours to try to represent your hopes for that child's learning. And the way I want you to think about it is this. I want you to think about your child is about to move out. Like this is the sad goodbye. Or if things went south in your house, this is the finally moment of freedom for both of you. But I'd like to think of this as the chance for your child to fly and be free. Okay? What do you want your child to enter the world that's not your home with? What do you want your child to know, see, notice, think, be able to do, believe, etc.? You're going to illustrate, annotate, you can make lists on the back, I don't care. I want you to get started today. Your child's about to leave your bosom. What do you want to make your sure your child carries with him or her from that moment into the next? Do not yet worry about what school should do. I want you to think about your child as a whole child, as a whole person, whose education is going to come from school and a lot of other places and settings. Do you have any questions about what I want you to do for the next 8 minutes? You can start now if you want. But if you feel offended by the nature of this assignment, and some people in the past have felt offended by it, they feel infantilized, they feel like being asked to draw inside lines is somehow childish. Please drop me a note or come find me, and I can talk about why I decided it was the right thing to do. Okay? If you feel offended by the nature of this work, don't hide out. Just come talk to me and we'll talk about it. Okay? But you still got to do it. Yes?
Yeah. You said we would come write that, like where?
You can write on the back if you want to. Some people like the words first, and if you're going to do a bunch of words to sort it out, you can put it on the back. The front with the outline is really for words and pictures. It's for you to illustrate. Yes? Please spend the next 7 minutes now doing that. If you have a question, we'll try to come over and answer it. Okay? You can peek at your neighbors too.
Wait, so in the end, the content is inside?
You can be outside, you can be inside. You got the whole sheet.
What am I supposed to do?
Illustrate it, draw pictures
What's the instruction?
to represent what you want your child entering the world with. Knowledge, attitudes, values, skills, or sensibilities.
Okay, so just basically illustration. What I want.
You don't have to do both sides, just get started.
Yeah. How much of both do you want?
I want that side most. Is that a lollipop?
No, it's a frying pan with an egg.
Ah, nice. You want your child to know how to cook?
Yeah, because
I just saw a frying pan with an egg. She wants her child to know how to cook her own food. I said her. Was it a him or a her? It's funny. I might have been doing some sexist stuff. She wants her child to be a reader. She's drawn a book. What is that? A plane. Why?
only traveler.
Be interested in travel, so she drew a little plane. You don't have to keep everything inside the outline. You could illustrate the whole page if you want. We want our child to speak at least 2 languages. Enthusiasm for learning. Sports. Like want to do or be able to do. Athletic. Your child to be active and athletic. To a picture, it looks like either a volleyball or a basketball. A heart. You want your child to be loving? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Kind of? Cool. If you're having a hard time thinking through it, think about knowledge, attitudes, values, skills, sensibilities, see, think, do, say, make, believe. Sure. Yeah, you can keep finishing up. I'm just going to be talking in the background if you're still writing. I don't want you to treat today's lecture and then the gingerbread kid activity as somehow independent of each other. If you know how learning works, and most of you at some point are going to say, I want my child to be a lifelong learner, or something like that, right? I want my child to keep learning when she walks out of my house. Then start thinking about, all right, given that what you know about how learning works, what are the qualities that you want your child to bring to real-life scenes that would make that kind of exploratory, risk-taking learning possible? Just don't forget to think about that. I'm not saying that's all you should think about. Don't forget it, because trying to integrate lecture into this a little bit. Your homework is to finish this. Bring it to class on Thursday. I'm not going to collect it. I might collect it. Okay, that's your homework. You have other homework too. There's some reading to do. Now, I will tell you the quiz question now, and I will also send it to you by email before tomorrow morning. Okay? The quiz question is, what's the difference between some version of this? It's not going to be word for word. What's the difference between ladder-like learning and leaf-like learning? Or ladder-like learning and tree-like learning? If you want the answer to that, you can pay attention to the lecture notes you maybe took. You can also go read David Hawkins. And the second part of the quiz is give an example of learning that looks like a tree or like a leaf. Hear that? First part, what's the difference? And the second part is, give me an example of that kind of leaf-like learning, exploratory, risk-taking, mistake-filled learning. If you can't think of an example from your own life or somebody else's life that you know, read the On Lynn's Shakes paper, because that whole paper is an example. Yes? Yes. On your way out today, TAs, can you make your way to an exit? On your way out, hand your TA your quiz.